Well, it's freezing in Salford. It's freezing in Salford in Greater Manchester. Good morning. How you doing? Are you well? It's December the 1st. Or the 1st of December 2019. Winter is here. Well, it's been here a few days now. Hope you're enjoying your Sunday morning or Sunday evening, depending on where you are. My name is Richie Allen. Welcome to Sunday View. Over the next hour, looking at the newspapers, which are dominated by one thing, the attack on London Bridge on Friday. So we'll talk about that, and we'll hear from the Andrew Marr Show on the BBC. We'll hear from Sophie Ridge on Sunday on Sky, and we'll have a chat as well, because you can tweet the programme. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Right, sure, without any further ado then, let's do it.
And the truth shall set you free!
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
It's actually quite beautiful this morning. In fact, despite the freezing conditions, it's a glorious morning. Sun is shining through the window of the studio here, and life is pretty relaxed this morning in Greater Manchester. I look forward to reading your tweets. I'm sure you'll have opinions on the events of Friday evening, late Friday afternoon in London. Maybe you'll want to tell me about something else. You know how to do so. You can tweet the absolute bejesus out of me. I'll be reading them as we go along. Let's get rid of theme. Yeah. I tell you, I watched The Irishman, Martin Scorsese, which features, well, not only does it feature Pacino and Pesci and obviously De Niro, but also a wonderful ensemble cast of men and women that you would have seen from previous Scorsese films, but also the amazing Sopranos television series. So I won't give you any spoilers. It's 3.5 hours, which I love. I love a good long film. Do you remember the days when 3-hour films weren't as uncommon as they are now, and the old projectionist would have to change the reel in the cinema, and the smokers ran out for a smoke? Well, they didn't have to, did they? Back in the day, you could smoke in the cinema. Thank God all of that has changed. But Frank Sheeran, yes, that's whom the film is based around. It's based around his relationship with Jimmy Hoffa, played by Pacino. It's a lot of supposition in the film about what happened to Hoffa and what didn't happen to him. I think it's a very, very good film. Not Scorsese's best, but very good, brilliantly acted by everybody that's in it. Pacino, a star in it, really. And some weird CGI stuff that they've employed to make Frank Sheeran look younger, or De Niro look younger as an actor, as a person in the film. And yeah, that was a bit disconcerting maybe. But it's a good film, and if you got 3.5 hours to kill, I think it took us about 4.5 hours to watch it. Because between the getting up to go to the toilet and between the getting up to cook the dinner and all the rest of it, I think we stretched it out over about 4.5 hours. But a good film. I'm going to give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. Do you like that? You do. We don't come here for film reviews, Alan. I know you don't. I'm well aware of it. And I have no skill in that direction, reviewing films. I wouldn't know how to begin. Right, the front pages, lot of coverage of Friday's events. Let's go straight to the front pages then. The Sunday People, beautiful spirit who took the side of the underdog. That's a story directly referencing one of the victims, one of the two people who were killed on Friday. That's the Sunday People. We're going with the tabloids first this morning. The Star on Sunday goes with Jack. This is the man, Jack, 25, slain by a jihadi nut. They let go free. That's the Star. Jack, 25, slain by a jihadi nut. They let go free. The Sunday Times. Boris vows to lock terrorists up and throw away the key. That's getting a lot of coverage. Vows does Boris to lock terrorists up, throw away the key. The Observer. PM thrusts terror attack into centre of election battle. That's in the Observer, or on the front page of the Observer. And on the front page of the Sunday Express, soft justice plays Russian roulette with our lives. And the Sunday Telegraph leads with PM's fury over 70 freed terrorists. Right. That's a few front pages then. Boris Johnson making lots of Sunday newspaper front pages today. He was on the Andrew Marr show this morning, very recently in fact. What happened on Friday then is the question that Andrew Marr first put to the Prime Minister. What happened? Here he is.
I'm afraid that when you look at the case, there are a number of conclusions that one can immediately draw, and that is, of course, first of all, Andrew, that I pay tribute to the emergency services, the reaction of the police, the public. Our sympathies, of course, are with the victims and their families. But although it is very early, I think it is legitimate to look at the case in the way that you just have and to ask ourselves exactly that question. How could he be out so early? The answer is, I'm afraid, that he was out because he was on automatic early release. When the judges reviewed his sentence in 2012, they had no option but to comply with the law that Labour brought in 2008, which meant effectively...
You say Labour, you've been in power for
effectively
a decade.
That he was out, they had to comply with the law as it stood, and he was out in 8 years. And this was a guy, don't forget, that Judge Wilkie said was a very serious jihadi. And that's why when I've been in office for 120 days.
Your party's been in power for 10 years.
That's why when I stood on the steps of Downing Street, I said we were putting more money into policing. But I also said in August that we would no longer allow the automatic early release of serious and violent offenders. And what we're doing now is there is a bill which was in the Queen's speech to prevent automatic early release. And as you know...
There is nothing in your manifesto that would have changed this case, is there? Nothing in your manifesto.
There's a bill in the Queen's speech to prevent automatic early release, which I have campaigned against. Yeah. And it was because, to get to your question, Andrew, it was because of automatic early release that this individual was out on the streets.
And that came about because...
And had it not been...
His original sentence was an indeterminate sentence to protect IPP, to direct the public. That was abolished by the Conservatives under your colleague Ken Clarke when he was Justice Secretary. Was that a mistake?
Right. So that's IPP sentencing, which is very controversial. It was abolished, but there are still people in prison under the terms of IPP sentencing. Okay, this was introduced some years ago. I think back in 2003, I think it came into the public consciousness because it was introduced as part of the Criminal Justice Act in 2003, and it basically was a form of indeterminate sentencing, which gave the authorities the power to keep people in prison longer than, they would have if they had a fixed sentence. So, for example, if stealing or fighting or vandalism, all of those things have fixed sentences, right? You get convicted for stealing or for vandalism or for fighting, breaching public order, whatever, you get a sentence. IPP sentencing was introduced to allow the authorities keep people in prison for as long as they bloody wanted if they determined that the person posed a risk to the public. Dreadful thing, very Kafkaesque, you might say. Madness, right? And it has been abolished. So Johnson was asked, was the Conservative government wrong to abolish it because maybe this guy, Usman Khan, would still be in prison? Ken Clarke oversaw the abolition of IPP sentencing. Were you wrong, Marr says to Johnson?
No, what we were doing...
Why not?
Was because he was sentenced under Labour's system that allowed him to be released automatically.
He was sentenced under IPP.
Having served only 8 years. And when the judges, Judge Leveson and others, reviewed his case in 2012, they determined that he could come out effectively after only 8 years.
Your government got rid of the IPPs in 2012. You got rid of the IPPs in 2012, and here is what the Ministry of Justice said about that. He said there was going to be new determinate sentences. This will see more dangerous criminals given life sentences and others spending longer periods in prison with tough conditions on release.
Absolutely.
It did not happen.
What we have said and what I have said since coming to office in the last 3 or 4 months is that I think this whole system of automatic early release, which was brought in by Labour, and it was under that system.
You've been in power for 10 years.
It was under that system. I've only been in office for 120 days.
So,
by the way,
you're leader of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has been in power for 10 years.
One of the reasons we're having this election is because we have a Queen's speech that was blocked by Parliament, amongst other things, not least Brexit. We need to get it done so that we can move forward.
Right, so the IPP sentencing is not the reason then. Mar wanted to know about Usman Khan. What were his parole conditions? Now, we say licence conditions, of course. What were the terms of his licence? You know, what did he have to do? What were his obligations? It's an interesting question. Does Mar get an answer from Johnson?
Let me ask you about Mr. Khan and what happened there. First of all, again, what are the conditions? People need to know what are the conditions that he was obliged.
Well, there were various conditions under which he was obliged to. He had mentors. He had restrictions on his mobile phone. He had restrictions on internet access, and so on. But
not enough.
But in my view, absolutely not. But the key issue, Andrew, is that he was allowed out early.
How many other people are in the same position?
He was allowed out early. And there was no, and this is very important, it was nothing to do with parole, it was nothing to do with the probation service.
So how many people are in the same position?
Legally, there was no way of stopping him from coming out early on the basis on which he was sentenced. So
Mar wants to know, he's asked him twice there, how many other people are out of prison now? People that might bear a strong similarity to Usman Khan. How many people are out that were convicted for terrorism and are out having only served half the sentence and are out now on licence? It's obviously an important question.
He was sentenced. So as for your question about how many others are...
here we go.
There are probably about 74.
Okay, you're trying to avoid my question by carrying on talking. Let me just ask you again.
You said how many others?
Okay.
74.
74 other people. What are you doing about them now?
Yes. What we're doing there is we've taken a lot of action, as you imagine, in the last 48 hours to... I don't want to go into the operational details.
But we're giving people an indication.
Well, we're doing... I'm sure people can imagine what we're doing to ensure that...
I'm sure people can imagine what we're doing with the 74 others that are out on licence having only served half their sentences. Well, I can't imagine, really. I suppose... He won't go into the details, really, but I suppose they're under 24-hour surveillance now, right, presumably?
That the 74 other individuals who've been let out early on the basis of this Labour change to the legislation...
Blaming Labour for this, even though the Conservative Party has been in government since 2010.
They are being properly invigilated so to ensure there is no threat.
So when you heard this,
and we took that action.
So when you heard this, you were concerned that this kind of thing could happen again and again and again, given the number of people who are getting out now.
Well, I do think there is an issue, as I've said, about automatic early release. I think it's wrong for serious sexual offenders. I think it's wrong for violent offenders. I think it's wrong for terrorists. And so I disagree with Jeremy Corbyn.
Corbyn again. He's the Prime Minister. And his predecessor was a Conservative Prime Minister. And her predecessor was a Conservative Prime Minister. Mar should really stick it to him here, you know. But he doesn't. Mar should say, what do you keep speaking about Jeremy Corbyn? It's not his problem. He didn't do it. He's not been responsible for policing, and he's not been responsible for probation and sentencing for 10 years. You have, you wild-haired goon. You have, and your pals. But Mar lets him away with it.
You said that.
When it comes to having shorter sentences for these people.
And you've got a new regime, but it's only happened in the last 48 hours. It's not in the manifesto. It's not something you were talking about before this happened. Well, you've had 10 years in government to get this regime for violent criminal terrorists right, and as a government, you have patently failed.
Yeah, he's brought up the 10 years, but he could have stopped him talking about Jeremy Corbyn as well. That's Boris Johnson. That interview, by the way, in its entirety, will be on the BBC webpage today, because at the very end of it, Maher does get into Brexit with him, and he does get into Johnson's comments on Islam and the Quran with him, but I can't be arsed with those issues this morning. Right, and I didn't have a lot of time to grab that audio and to edit it, but it's not relevant. We're going to stay with this terrorist event in London, because we'll do the job in the absence of the mainstream media. We'll pull apart one or two things that are very strange about it. Now listen, no truther am I. No truther am I. I wasn't there on Friday. I don't know what happened. I do know a man was shot dead by the police. And I do know that people were stabbed. Okay? How do you know? Well, I believe that is what happened. It unfolded, a lot of it has unfolded with in the full glare of people with mobile phones and tablets and devices. So, dreadful thing. We'll talk in a few minutes about some of the things the mainstream media is ignoring. But I don't have any answers. It's irresponsible of any broadcaster to be saying, oh, this didn't happen or that didn't happen or MI5 was behind it and all this stuff. Nobody knows, right? But we'll ask a few questions. That's our job. You and me. We'll ask a few questions and we'll point out one or two anomalies. Because there's some very, very concerning things about what happened on Friday. So, those were the licensing conditions. Blaming Labour. As I said, even though his government has been in power for years, 74 others at the moment, presumably under incredible scrutiny now. What about Jeremy Corbyn? He's the leader of the Labour Party, of course. By the way, dear listener, a YouGov poll last week, you might remember, it made the news for 2 days. A YouGov poll last week led us to believe that Boris Johnson's Conservative Party might have a fairly hefty majority after the election on December 12th, which is a week on Thursday. Well, that's all up in the air now, because a number of polls have come out this morning to show that the gap between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is in fact decreasing. It's closing, and it's closing significantly. Very interesting in that. We might get into that in the week, because I have a lot, I take a different opinion, no pun intended, to opinion polls. I have a different point of view when I look at them and their usefulness. So Jeremy Corbyn was on with Sophie Ridge on Sky News. She's Sky's their counter programme to Andrew Marr. And he was asked about the sentencing and was it right that Khan was let out on this automatic early release? Here's Jeremy Corbyn.
I think it depends on the circumstances, depends on the sentence, but crucially depends on what they've done in prison. So not necessarily then? No, not necessarily, no. I think there has to be an examination of how our prison services work and crucially what happens to someone released from prison, because I need to know whether or not the parole board were involved in his release. Apparently they were not. They made that statement quite quickly after the release, after yesterday's terrible incident. Secondly, that there was apparently no probation service involvement in monitoring this former prisoner, who after all had only served half his sentence and he came out I think a year ago. And there has to be an examination of what goes on in the prison, because prisons ought to be a place where people are put away because of major serious offences, but also a place where rehabilitation takes place.
So what would a Labour government do to change
well, we do a
current
number of
system
things.
then?
One, properly fund our prison service so that the prison officers are able to do their job, both being prison officers as well as educators, as well as people that deal with dangerous prisoners who've committed very dangerous, very serious offences. Secondly, that there be a psychological assessment of somebody in his situation before they are released to see if they are actually a danger, an ever-present danger to society, and that the parole board be involved in making that decision whether they go out ahead of full sentence, and after that we have a probation service worthy of the name.
A probation service worthy of the name. Ridge then asked Jeremy Corbyn about the shooting of Usman Khan. Were the police right to shoot him dead on London Bridge on Friday? What did Corbyn say?
I think they had no choice. They were stuck with a situation where there was a credible threat of a bomb belt around his body, and it's an awful situation for any police officer or any public servant to be put in.
You've spoken about shoot to kill before. In 2015 you said, I'm not happy with the shoot to kill policy in general. I think it's quite dangerous. I think it could also be counterproductive. Is that still your view?
This was a situation where the police were faced with a very dangerous position. Somebody who'd already killed 2 people. The police may or may not have known that at that point. And he was wrestled to the ground, and as far as they were concerned, he had explosives strapped to his body, and they took the action that they could. I think the police have to take what action they can to defend people in that situation.
So have you changed your mind then when you said that you're not happy with the shoot to kill policy?
The points I made in the past.
Can I just interject there? I was going to give a bit of a talk on the radio show last week or the week before, and I thought each time I went to do it, I thought, don't do it, Rich, because it's going to go on forever and ever. And you won't be able to stop talking, and you've got guests and stuff. But I wanted to talk about binary choice tactic, which is something that men and women in academia for years would have been highly critical of. You know what binary choice tactic is? You know, the notion that there's only an either or a yes or no, or you're with it or against it approach to everything. You're either for or against it. The answer is yes or no. When most of the subjects that we deal with in life, not just on radio shows, but as we negotiate life, most of the things we encounter are complex and can't be decided or understood or analysed through yes or no, or you're for or you're bloody against. And this is a classic example of it here. You know, Ridge trying to highlight this notion that Corbyn is against shoot to kill, or he's for shoot to kill. But it's a very nuanced thing, of course. You can't just be for or against shoot to kill, as Corbyn is describing here. I'm going to do something on this in the week, because this has crept into the media discourse carried out or carried through the media, binary choice tactic. And we're seeing it, of course, on social media. I, of course, had a massive, I had a personal experience of it back in July, when some silly woman, whose name I forget and who didn't listen to the radio programme, but I think she's Jewish, asked me what did I think of the Holocaust. Now, that's binary choice. The only acceptable answer is that it's terrible. I'm not saying it wasn't terrible, of course. The only acceptable answer is terrible, terrible, terrible thing, and we must make sure it never happens again. That's the answer. There's no other acceptable answer. My answer to her on Twitter, which caused 3 days of absolute carnage in my life, was, I'm sick to fucking death of it. And it's happening now more and more, and we're seeing it on social media. Binary choice. Either or. You have to be either or. Well, I don't. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of, there's a lot of strands to the discussion. So it's interesting, she's trying to pin him down on this whole, you are or you're not for or against. You are for or you're against shoot to kill. It's a stupid fucking question, excuse my French.
Asked, particularly in relation to Northern Ireland, this is going back quite a long way, was that there was a concern in Northern Ireland that the police were adopting a shoot-to-kill policy when it was possible to arrest people rather than shoot them. And
they were extrajudicially murdering Republicans in the north of Ireland, the RUC was, when they didn't need to be shot. Often when they weren't armed. And then they would write up a report saying the guy was fleeing. They were murdering people, effectively. That's what Corbyn is saying. So you can't be for or against shoot to kill. It's very complex.
That's my point.
That's a good point as well. Jeremy Corbyn there. And finally, on Corbyn for the moment, she wanted to dig down into this idea of, is the Labour Party best placed to keep people safe from terrorism? This notion that, the Conservative Party is stronger in terms of its approach to law and order, and the Conservatives might be better at dealing with terrorism. Sophie Ridge with the questions, then you'd hear Corbyn's answer.
I just want to talk a little bit more widely about keeping people safe, because this is what lots of voters will be basing some of their decision on. Will this person keep me safe if they're Prime Minister? The Labour manifesto says that you want to ensure the powers exercised by the security services are proportionate and used in accordance with human rights. some people will read that and think you want to make it harder for the security services to do their jobs.
No, I want to protect public servants, be they in the armed forces or the security services somewhere else, that they know that they have a code that they have to adopt, which is one about protecting life and protecting the human rights of all of us, and that they're also accountable for what they do. Hence, all the things in our manifesto are about parliamentary accountability of government services and of security services.
Just talking about human rights in particular, do you ever worry that, in the wake of terror attacks, for example, the balance between security and human rights swings too far in favour of human rights, in favour of security as opposed to human rights?
Well, the two things...
Again, the binary choice, If you are in favour of human rights, well, then you're not in favour of the security forces taking the actions needed to protect people. Again, binary choice. It's really crept in here. It was first noticeable really in US media, particularly on Fox, going back to the early days of Bill O'Reilly. And it really does have an influence on people, this. It really does. The more people are exposed to this, the more people become like it. The more it influences their own thinking. Binary choice, What a stupid question again. From Ridge. What a stupid supposition. If you are more concerned, if you're very concerned about human rights, well then you're on the side of the terrorists, or it helps the terrorists. No. Corbyn, to his credit here, as mumbly as he is, he really deals with this well, I think.
Well, the two things don't have to be indivisible by any means.
But sometimes you have to make a difficult choice between those two competing things.
Well,
no, why do you have to make a different choice between human rights and dealing with the terrorists? Why? You're back to the whole thing. If you believed that the Bakr al-Baghdadi, the jihadi daddy, if he had the codes or if he had the knowledge of where a bomb was going to go off, is it okay to torture him? This nonsense that they keep dragging up, it's nonsensical, this. Corbyn is good at dealing with it.
Difficult decisions have to be made all the time. That's what government has to do, and that's what public life is about. But the fundamental has to be the rights of the individual to express their views in society in a proportionate way, and it has to be about our rights of free speech and assembly. That is surely what we're about as a country. That's why we are part of the UN human rights system. It's why we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights. These things are actually quite important because they protect all of us.
Do you think that sometimes human rights are under a threat, though? When it comes to the balance between them and security?
You have to create a secure society and you have to defend human rights at the same time. If you give up all your democratic and human rights, then you've actually given in to those that would take them away anyway.
Good man. And the threat to human rights is not coming from, in this country, is not coming from deeply rooted, hidden Al-Qaeda or ISIS terrorist cells. Now, I'm not saying that radicalised men don't exist. I'm not saying that. I'd be a fool to say that. Yes, they are out there. Not anywhere near as many of them, I believe, as the media would have you believe. The greatest threat to freedom and human rights is coming from your own governments. Not from radicalised cells in Birmingham or in London or in Manchester. It's coming from your own governments. This is mad. Lots of blaming, finger pointing. The media is wretched, Do we need longer sentences? Do we need whole life tariffs? More police? Armed police? Should the British jihadis and their babies be allowed to come home from Syria? It's like a never-ending episode of Dr. Phil. Or Ricky Lake, probably better example. Sally Jesse, Raphael. There's no journalism. None. It's all binary choice stuff. No questions from the media. Not a single question about some of the most troubling aspects of what we've learned since Friday. We'll take a very quick musical break, and when we come back from that, we'll have a look at some of the things that are a bit troubling about Friday. And I'll be looking for your comments on Twitter as well. It is Sunday morning, of course. It's December 1st, 2019. My name is Richie Allen, by the way. How you doing? You well? This is a lovely song from Wet Wet Wet. It's called Sweet Surrender. The time is 11:30 or thereabouts. Back with more comment after this.
Renowned healer Mark Bayersky travels the world to find the most unique and powerful crystals for self-healing. Since the ancient times, crystals have been used as healing tools. They hold a natural healing vibration and are highly charged in positive energy. Mark teaches how to channel the universal energy and transfer it to the crystal to activate its healing power. Each crystal is used for its unique ability to target a different physical or emotional challenge. Mark Bayersky is an author, healer, speaker, and founder of the Pure Energy Healing Academy. He shares powerful messages of inspiration and healing on his daily YouTube videos, reaching millions worldwide. Mark's crystals, healing oils, and incense sticks are most sought after by other healers. His collection is available online at www.markbayersky.com. His work is presented through Lemon House, a company that creates and curates consciously made gifts.
Welcome back. 26 and a half minutes to the top of the area with Sunday View with me, Richie Allen, live from Salford in Greater Manchester. It's December 1st and it's a glorious day, if not absolutely freezing. I think it's about 6 degrees now. That's in American money, that's minus whatever, I don't know what it is, but it's 6 degrees centigrade here, and it's cold. But it looks lovely. It's a lovely wintry scene as I look out my window here. Stop looking out the window. Right, we're back then. Few tweets before we move on. Thanks for tweeting me, by the way. I really appreciate that. Let me just get rid of this for a minute so I can read your tweets. Hi to Chris Black. How you doing, Chris? Chris came in rat-arsed drunk last night and finds himself in the doghouse. The punishment is he has to peel the veg. Not much of a modern man, Chris. The implication being that you wouldn't be peeling the veg unless you were being punished. Peel the veg. Peel it anyway. Hi to Paul. I'm not one of those who cries false flag whenever there's an event like this, but it's already being heavily politicised. I see the Telegraph is running an article today about Corbyn's view on lesser sentences for terror suspects. Indeed, it is being politicised. Base Ninja says Boris is so full of lies. They all are. It makes me mad, he says. Yes, they all are full of lies. Hi to Paul Curtis. How you doing, Paul? The Conservatives want to build 10,000 more prison spaces, Richie. Who benefits? G4S and Serco, that's who, says Paul. This report covers what's going on in Britain's prisons. Thanks for the report, mate. I have retweeted it and I am very much aware of it because I've been covering that issue for many years now, the privatisation of the prison service. Hi to Steve James. Hi to David Stanford. David asks the question, silence the asset or the patsy? I don't know. La Antenna, a long-time listener to the programme, whose real name is David, I believe, as well. Pretty obvious it wasn't a real suicide vest, Richie, seeing as Usman Khan chose not to detonate it whilst buried under a pile of people. By the time the coward cops came out of hiding, the heroic public had tackled, disarmed and detained him. Job done. Mate, I can't say that you're wrong there. You go on to say no justification for shoot to kill in this case. Surely any suicide bomber would use a dead man's trigger, you ask. And again, I can't say to you, you're wrong, because I don't know that you are. But I often wonder why people are so adamant, so ardent in their opinion. The fact is, mate, while you might be right, you have no way of knowing that you are right. And any police officer, any armed policeman or policewoman confronted with that sight can surely make a case for pulling the trigger. And who knows what is obviously and what isn't obviously a suicide belt either. A part of me is playing the devil's advocate here, but a part of me wonders why people are so keen to form a definite, absolutely rooted, position on any given issue. What happened to it could be argued, mate? Because I can understand you saying it could be argued, but you don't know for sure. We don't know for sure, tragically. I understand why the scepticism. Of course, I understand. I'm as sceptical as the next man. But I don't know why people are so regimented in their thinking. But anyway, that's not to criticise you or to, in any way to, I don't know, shut up, Richie, move on. Right, who was Usman Khan? Well, he was involved in an active terrorist cell in Stoke, or around Stoke. And this was allegedly headed by Anjam Chowdhury, who I've interviewed about 20 times over the years. He's out on licence now, Chowdhury, as far as I understand. I've tried to reach him with no joy. But anyway, so what happened? Well, MI5 basically came up with intelligence that some men, 9 of them in total, from Cardiff and Stoke and also from London, including Usman Khan, were plotting to bomb the London Stock Exchange. However, the plot was infantile. It was garbage. These morons would never have succeeded. Okay? That doesn't matter. I know it doesn't, but I'm just pointing out these guys were clowns, right? And Khan, Usman Khan, who was shot dead on Friday, apparently he wanted to set up a terrorist training school, which they call madrasa. And he wanted to set it up in Kashmir to basically send British militants out to Kashmir to fight there or to learn some skills and come back here and blow places up and kill people. Okay? So he was convicted in 2012 along with the others. And the BBC says this morning that at the time, the authorities and the prosecutors were kind of wondering, are these guys genuine, hardened, lunatic terrorists, or are they fantasists? Right? 16 years in jail. Now, when Khan was in jail, Usman Khan, he asked to be allowed to participate in a de-radicalisation program. He wrote to the Home Office in 2012, in October, to ask for help, basically, to ask for somebody to come and work with him. His solicitor is a guy called Vajahat Sharif, and he told the BBC over the weekend that Khan repeatedly asked for help in finding someone to come and talk to him about his radicalisation. Okay? Okay. He was released on licence last year, and he was subject to a variety of forms of management in the community, and that's pretty common. So he would have had the bracelet on. His movements would have been monitored. He'd have a curfew. He'd have to regularly liaise with the police, with a designated person. GPS tag, as I said. He was banned from speaking to his former associates, and he was obliged to take part in the desistance and disengagement program. That's a government program, desistance and disengagement program, DPP, right? Now, what's very interesting about Usman Khan is that he was used as a case study by the Education Initiative. This is the Education Initiative that was meeting near London Bridge on Friday. And they used this guy as a case study. So I want you to keep this in mind. Friday wasn't the first time that Usman Khan attended meetings with the Education Initiative as a model example of de-radicalisation. So keep that in mind, right? This is something that the mainstream media is trying to keep from you. And it's just not mentioning it. It's just not mentioning that this guy appeared many, many times with the Education Initiative and was believed to be a fairly decent bloke. Right? For all the fact that he was allegedly plotting to blow up the London Stock Exchange, this guy was a case study. Look, this is how it works, de-radicalisation. And he'd been with these people basically since he came out of prison a year ago. All right? Keep that in mind. And the report that they published, Education Initiative, tells a very interesting story about the Learning Together programme at Her Majesty's Prison Whitemoor in Cambridgeshire, where Khan was imprisoned. And Khan was very, very important to the Learning Together program in prison. Again, this guy was a model prisoner, basically. Keep that in mind. Okay? And since leaving prison, he's given speeches at fundraising dinners and was given a laptop, a secure one, by the way, to comply with his license conditions. He contributed a poem to a brochure in which he expressed gratitude for the computer. And he thanked the Learning Together team and all the wonderful people who are helping in the wonderful community. This is who he is, Usman Khan. Model prisoner. And this is a point that was made by Paul Gibson on Sky News this morning. Paul Gibson was on Sky. He's a former MOD, that's Ministry of Defence, a former MOD Director for Counter-Terrorism. This guy's a bit of a big cheese, Paul Gibson. And he says, yes, Khan seemed to be a model for rehabilitation.
Usman Khan was engaging with, whilst he was in prison, he took part in the desist and disengagement program. He was then on license engaging with this prisoner rehabilitation program, which led to the incident on Friday. So in some regards, he was seen also as a model of somebody who has changed his ways. And
he was a model of somebody who changed his ways. He was very well liked.
Seen also as a model of somebody who has changed his ways, and then he commits the atrocity on Friday. So perhaps not only should we treat these people as criminals and put them through the criminal justice system, but perhaps we need to look at this too as though it's almost like an illness. It's
like an illness. This is very, very interesting. Now, you've got to pay attention to this. Nobody's picking up on this morning, not in the mainstream nor the independent media. This guy was allowed to say this and he wasn't challenged.
But perhaps we need to look at this too as though it's almost like an illness.
An illness.
If somebody has been radicalised, is that
somebody has been radicalised? It's an illness. Think independent media. Think ahead a few years. If an idea like this gestates, that a type of thinking, an ideology could be likened to an illness. Where could that go, do you think? You know? Never been one of those now, and you well know this, you've been listening to me for many, many years. Never fear-mongered, no fear porn here, but listen to this again, it's very, very important.
Criminal justice system. But perhaps we need to look at this too as though it's almost like an illness. If somebody has been radicalised, is that a lifetime condition? He or she is never going to change his ways. So I think
radicalised to think that vaccines are dangerous, for example. Radicalised to believe that the intelligence agencies sometimes conduct false flag operations. It's an illness. It's an ideology. It's an illness. It's an illness. Right?
I think we really need to better understand this. And as you say, if somebody says, I'm no longer interested in pursuing Islamist terrorism, can we just take his word for it? Clearly not.
Right, so, apart from the very scary thoughts there from Paul Gibson, the former MOD Director for Counter-Terrorism, terrifying thoughts about categorising somebody as having a mental illness because of what they think or believe. Now, I don't have any sympathy for radicalised jihadis. Lock them all up, I say. When they plot to blow up buildings and shoot people and stab people, of course, get rid of them, get them off the streets. But you know what I'm saying here, right? That's one thing. But to be categorising somebody's belief as an illness, anyway, right? You get the point. We'll leave it there. So then, of course, he goes on to say that, well, it seems that basically Usman Khan was a Marlon Brando, Laurence Olivier standard actor, that he was just lying, basically, over the last few years when he was taking part in all these prison programs, when he was coming out giving speeches at dinners, when he was presented to the public as a great example of how people can be de-radicalised. Basically, this guy was just lying. And all the time he was biding his time. Am I saying that's not the case? No, I'm not. But I'm doing the job the mainstream media should be doing. I'm posing a few rhetoricals. We're asked to swallow a lot here, right? And just accept it without challenging it. This is a lot to take in. that this guy went to this meeting with this group that he knew well, his friends, on Friday. One of many meetings that he's taken part in. And on Friday he decided to briefly leave the room, tape a couple of knives to his hands, a fake suicide vest, stab some people at the event, and then run off down fucking London Bridge. That's a lot to swallow and to digest without saying, hang on a second, but let me ask a question. And the media is asking no questions. None. The media is doing that which the media does. I put a tweet out over the weekend about this. It's allowing politicians come on the air to say they hate our freedoms. They'll never win. They hate our way of life. We must come together. Je suis London and all that bullshit. The media fosters that. It allows it to happen. It provides a platform for all that pathos and all that nonsense. And it doesn't ask some questions. You know? None. Just allows the narrative go unchallenged. And one of the witnesses to this has given an interview to the Mail on Sunday this morning. One of the guys who was at the meeting. And he said suddenly he just flipped. Suddenly he flipped. Bang, gone. Suddenly he was there. Everything was hunky-dory. And he flipped. Suddenly. Bang, just like that. He pissed off around the corner and came back with knives taped to his hands. Just like that. Bang. And started stabbing people. And then I'm watching this unfold on Friday. And one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen happened. Now, those of you who follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen this on Friday. A couple of listeners were kind enough to send me clips that were taken, video clips that were uploaded by passers-by on the bridge. And one of them shows a man that we now know is a British Transport Police officer. Again, uncomfortable that. A British Transport Police officer seemingly running away just before Khan is shot with a blade in his hand. But on the clip that was uploaded to social media by the ordinary man or woman on the bridge, that clip clearly shows the alleged British Transport Police officer walking away with a knife, but then he reaches deliberately into his pocket, withdraws what appears to be a hanky, and very deliberately throws it away. And you can see that on the video. Why is it bizarre? Well, for a number of reasons. Firstly, Sky began to broadcast the same clip, but Sky cuts the clip just before the police officer reaches into his pocket to throw the hanky away. Why? Why? Sky wouldn't do that unless it was significant. And before you ask, no, Sky doesn't cut the clip because that's the very moment the attacker is shot in the head. No. He's not shot for several seconds later. Quite a few seconds later, in fact. Sky made the editorial decision to cut the clip of the policeman walking away with the knife just before we see him reaching into his pocket to take a handkerchief out, which he throws away. Come on, people. Why did Sky cut that out? That's evidence. Why did he throw it away? What fucking police officer serving, even if it's fucking Clouseau in Montpellier, would throw it away? It's evidence. The hanky. What was he doing with it? Right. He had the presence of mind to reach into his pocket very deliberately, remove a handkerchief and throw it away. And Sky and the BBC, by the way, cut that so you didn't see him throw the hanky away. But we saw it because the person who uploaded it, first of all, uploaded it to Twitter. Bizarre. Attacks happening just before elections. Bizarre. Happening all the time. Last election, 2017, London Bridge. 2015, referendum, Joe Cox. Here's an amazing coincidence. There's a NATO summit here in the UK next week. The heads of the NATO countries will be in the country. And incredibly, they're going to be talking about defence spending. and how defence spending needs to be increased. And incredibly, just recently, the Conservative Party has been accused of planning to cut military funding and reducing the army. You couldn't make it up. Here's Lucy Fisher of the Times newspaper on the Andrew Marr show this morning. You couldn't make this up. Marr asks her about cuts to military spending here in the UK, including reducing the army. Wow.
So let's talk a little bit about defence as an issue. It's always on the edge of this, Lucy, the election. It never really makes it to the centre. But there was a moment, was it last week, that your sister paper was saying there was going to be another big cut to the army, down from 80,000 to 60,000.
Yeah. Another big cut to the army. Another big cut to the army, down from 80,000 to 60,000.
Was it last week that your sister paper was saying there was going to be another big cut to the army, down from 80,000 to 60,000? And even possibly handing over one of the aircraft carriers to the Americans.
And giving an aircraft carrier to the United States. And all of a sudden you have a terrorist attack on London Bridge. NATO is in town next week. NATO is in town next week. And the military is being reduced. Nobody wants the military to be reduced. When I say nobody, of course, the hidden hand, the shadow operators, the global financiers, they want perpetual war. A never-ending increasing of armies. Paul Craig Roberts would call them the military security complex. The military industrial complex. So we have this thing where the Conservatives cutting the army by 20,000, reducing military spending, giving an aircraft carrier away, and then you have a terrorist attack in London. Amazing, really, isn't it? Isn't it? Amazing coincidence. What does it mean, Richie? It might mean nothing. See, that's journalism. I don't know. But it is the job of the mainstream media presenters to say that. They are fucking thinking it. And if they are thinking it, they should say it. It is occurring to Andrew Marr. Jesus Christ. Big threat to reduce military spending. Last week. Next week, NATO is in town. And we have a week between the two. And bang, we have a terrorist attack. To concentrate people's minds on the need to expand the military, not to reduce it. Wow. Just before an election, right? Wow. What does it mean, Richie? Again, I don't know. Might mean sod all. It might not amount to more than a hill of beans. I don't know. Don't know. But there's enough there in what I've just said to you. There is enough there between the bizarre behaviour of Usman Khan in the lead up to the attempted knifings and the successful knifings, sadly, because 2 people died. You know, there's enough there, isn't there, for the media to do a bit of digging rather than just sit there and sloganeer. They hate our way of life. They want to destroy the way we live. They hate our diversity, we heard a lot of over the weekend. They hate our diversity. They want to attack it. And that is what you get from the media. What you don't get is what I've just done, which is say there's some very concerning aspects to this, and there are some things that do not add up. So what's really going on? I don't know what's going on. I can't declare that to be a definite false flag event. I can't, because I don't know. But I have my suspicions about it. You know, we've been asked by many great researchers over the years to pose the question, cui bono, who benefits? Who benefits? Why did the man just flip? Why did he flip all of a sudden on Friday, having attended these events, you know, on numerous occasions, having friends there? A model for rehabilitation. Why? Why bang? Do we believe Peter Gibson, the former MOD counter-terrorism guy, that he was just a good liar? And that we shouldn't believe people anymore when they say they're de-radicalised? Should we believe Gibson, or should we say, no, you're asking us to swallow a lot there? But that's where we are in 2019 with the mainstream media. They will not ask these questions. They will cut short video clips. That is an egregious form of editorialising. It is egregious in the extreme. You've got the whole video that shows the policeman walking away and deliberately reaching into his pocket and throwing a handkerchief away. That's not nothing. That's not a snotty handkerchief that he's throwing on the ground. He's littering, for fuck's sake, on London Bridge. Why? It's occurred to him that he must throw that handkerchief away. Why? Is it a signal for somebody? Is there a reason for it? Because it's evidence. He's carrying a murder weapon in his hand. He's touched it. Right? Media doesn't want to know. The media does worse than just not want to know. The media cuts the part where he throws the handkerchief away. So there are a lot of questions about it. That's where I'm going to leave you. We're out of time today. Thanks for listening. I know I'm running away now. An abrupt end to Sunday View. Think about that. Here's music from The Who. This is The Seeker closing out Sunday View. I'll be back with you tomorrow at 9:30. And that's the 9:30 paper review show. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye for now.